You're about to discover something about a man that many people in Britain have deemed to be the country's most evil. Levi Belfield was able to carry out his terrible deeds without being discovered by the authorities. He is a guy without conscience or sorrow. He earned the monikers Bus Stop Stalker, Bus Stop Killer, and Hammerman throughout his criminal rampage. His victims are numerous, and it is impossible to know for certain how many people he has victimized over the years. Belfield had to be stopped, but despite all of his criminal activity, he wasn't a simple man to catch. Belfield, on May 17, 1968, in the West Middlesex Hospital in London, Levi Rabbits was born. When Levi was just 10 years old, Joseph Rabbits, his father, passed away from leukemia. His mother remarried, and he gained the Belfield surname along with his 2 brothers and 2 sisters. They were all raised in southwest London on a council estate. Although life was difficult and a little unpleasant, they had a decent and steady childhood. From a young age, Belfield showed little to no respect for women. In many ways, he believed they had been placed in the world for the sexual enjoyment of men, mainly him, and he saw them as inferior sexual objects. Over the years, he managed to date a variety of women, but none of his marriages appeared to last very long. He fathered 11 children in total with 5 different women, but regrettably, as he grew older, his contempt for women would reach new and unsettling heights. On March 21, 2002, Millie Dallar, then 13, is seen on surveillance footage in Walton-on-Thames, Surrey, going down Station Road as she returns from school. Except for a very small section along a busy road where there was a blind spot, her regular route to and from school was covered in CCTV cameras. Millie had a reputation for being very opinionated and independent. She didn't manage to fool anyone. Everyone was certain that if she didn't know them, a passing stranger who offered her a ride home wouldn't con her. However, Millie vanished into thin air after passing past a CCTV blind area that measured 20 to 30 yards in length. Naturally, when Millie didn't come home from school, her family started to worry. They were confident that she would have kept them informed if she got sidetracked on the way home, because she was a good girl who would always stay in touch with them. Police rushed into action, using all the additional resources they could conjure, taking into account Millie's age and the fact that her absence was so unusual. However, neither leads nor results came from the search. In the meantime, 34-year-old Levi Belfield and his 23-year-old girlfriend Emma were house-sitting for a friend across town in a neighborhood named West Drayton. Levi, according to his girlfriend, left the house all day and didn't come back until after 11 o'clock that night, delivering takeout for the 2 of them. The 2 retired to bed following dinner. Levi, however, claimed he was unable to sleep and made the decision to return to the couple's Walton-on-Thames residence around 3 in the morning rather than feeling exhausted. Had to be stopped. But despite all of his criminal activity, he wasn't a simple man to catch. Emma had no reason to believe Belfield would return to the apartment. This would all change, though, when Emma came back to the flat the following day, and even his faithful girlfriend started to question his actions. The flat was pristine when Emma got back, and all the bed sheets had been thrown out on top of that. Belfield claimed that the sheets had been thrown away because her dog had an accident and left a mess on them. Emma, though, discovered another issue. Her automobile had vanished, the same vehicle that Belfield allegedly used to travel from their flat in the early morning to the home in West Drayton. Belfield offered an explanation once more. He said that he had gone out for a drink with a friend and was too drunk to drive, so he got out of the car. Recall that, about 3 in the morning, Levi Belfield departed the apartment. Who wants their friend to show up for a drink at that hour in the morning? Emma demanded her car back, of course, so the pair went to where it was supposed to be. However, the automobile was missing. In actuality, Emma would never see that car again. Emma decided to disregard the incident despite her worries. She most likely believed Belfield was involved with a different woman. She persisted in staying with him nonetheless, and they moved into a new house in Little Benty, West Drayton. Belfield's new neighbors were really taken with him. Although the majority of the neighborhood believed he was a kind guy, he had a bad habit of leaving cars parked in inconvenient spots, necessitating repeated requests for him to relocate them. From personal experience, you might be aware that this quickly becomes very annoying. However, Belfield's perspective quickly changed. He developed a special aversion to an older couple who lived on the same street, as his neighbors had noted. He would scold them verbally and was allegedly responsible for damaging the couple's garden by spraying weed killer all over it. The fact that the elderly man adored gardening made this extra insensitive. He was ecstatic about it. Nobody truly knows what he was attempting to accomplish. However, he purchased 2 dogs who were, to put it mildly, not very sociable with people in order to make sure that nobody came close to his house. You can understand why his neighbors were suspicious of him when you consider that he also used barbed wire to conceal the stolen fences. Now that his yard resembled a prisoner of war camp more, people began to wonder what he was concealing. At the time, the neighbor of Levi and Emma expressed his worries about their family life, saying,
"They played the part of a couple, happy couple and all that, but Emma's whole demeanour told a different picture." I think Emma was very fearful. I think Levi bullied her. She cried quite a lot. You know, a happy person doesn't do that. I don't know what he was trying to achieve. I don't know what he was hiding. But it was all very strange.
But statements made by an ex-girlfriend do little more than illustrate Belfield's mental state. He had erratic mood swings and would quickly transition from being kind and loving to cruel and awful. I had to segregate his food when we were eating. The meat would not be permitted to contact anything else on the plate, and the potatoes and carrots would need to be kept apart. He believed I was attempting to poison him, so he used to make me eat everything on his plate.
When I was first pregnant with my daughter, he was absolutely over the moon. Then it changed because he already had girls with his previous partner, and he'd always wanted a boy. So it kind of went downhill from there.
Police continued their search for Millie Dallar in the interim. Still no luck after 6 months. That is, up until September 18th, 2002. In the Hampshire town of Yateley Heath, there was a gathering of people picking mushrooms. One of them made a curious observation. They approached it and found a young girl's partially decomposing, naked body. The cause of death could not be determined because of how thoroughly the body had decayed. Sadly, authorities were able to determine that the remains were those of Millie Dallar using dental records. There was nothing of hers in the vicinity. She had a cell phone, a satchel, and a pocketbook with her when she vanished, and she was obviously dressed in her school uniform. Police classified the inquiry as a murder case and gave it the new name Operation Ruby once the body was found. However, the individual they were seeking would commit another murder just down the road while police were looking into the murder. On February 4th, 2003, a new murder occurred in Hampton, Middlesex, a beautiful, historic neighborhood west of London. Marcia McDowell, a 19-year-old college student, was walking home on this chilly evening after seeing a movie with a friend. The 1 to 11 bus picked Marcia up, and it drove her home. She got off the bus and went onto the street where her parents resided after walking around the corner. Marcia was attacked around 100 yards from the front door as she came within eyeshot of her house. Marcia was wandering carefree in the middle of a quiet, chilling night, her breath streaming out of her mouth in front of her face, when suddenly someone rushed up behind her and smacked her in the back of the head with a ruthless, potent blow. Due to the force of the strike, Marcia fell unconscious right away. Eventually, she was discovered and an ambulance was dispatched. Sadly, they were unable to save her. With severe brain injuries, she was brought to intensive care, but the following day, she tragically passed away. The investigation into Marcia's irrational assault got going right away. Buses in the UK are fortunately equipped with CCTV, which offered the police an extremely shaky lead. A silver Vauxhall Corsa was spotted close to the bus stop as Marcia exited the vehicle. The Corsa followed Marcia as she moved away from the Percy Road bus stop and around the bend. A car like this would appear to be a promising lead at first, but Vauxhall Corsas are fairly widespread in the UK. They make up over 3% of all vehicles driven in Britain. To make matters worse, it was unable to clearly see the registration plate from the CCTV camera. Levi Belfield had secured a respectable position in the interim. He was a doorman for a number of bars and clubs. He was perfect for this position. He was belligerent, eager to fight, and enjoyed getting his own way. In the event that something went wrong at the doors and a brawl broke out, Belfield would gladly intervene. People who knew Belfield have claimed that his upbringing is where he developed his passion for fighting and his obsession with having large muscles. Belfield was a frail boy who was his mother's favorite as a youngster. She physically wiped his behind until he was 12 years old, and he slept in her bed until he was 16 years old. Strangely, he continued to sleep in his mother's bed whenever he visited her in his 30s. Belfield endured persistent bullying during his time in school. He wasn't called Bugsy at school because he resembled the American gangster of the 1920s. It was rumored that Belfield had sex with his 15-year-old sister's rabbit and subsequently snapped its neck. Although we must emphasize that this was only a rumor, whether it was accurate or not, the label would follow him throughout school. According to the police, they are currently conducting what they believe to be two different investigations. The so-called bus stop killer who had murdered Millie Dallar was still at large, and there was no proof or suspect in sight. The only lead they had was the silver Vauxhall Corsa, which was about as useful as a needle in a haystack when they were trying to find the so-called Blitz killer, following the kind of violent random attack launched on Marcia MacDonald. 2 years had passed since the murders of Marcia MacDonald and Millie Dallar, respectively. Both investigations had made little to no progress. Their murderer or murderers remained at large. An 18-year-old student named Kate Shee was returning home from a night out with friends on May 28, 2004, in Isleworth, Middlesex, just a few miles from the scene of Millie and Marcia's deaths. She got the bus and started walking down the block where she lived, just like unfortunate Marcia MacDonald had done approximately a year before. She was crossing the street on the left when a car sped by, slammed on the brakes, and slid onto the pavement. Kate decided to go on the opposite side of the road because she was being cautious and didn't enjoy the circumstances. However, the driver was unimpressed with Kate's behavior and would not be discouraged. When the automobile turned around and sped up at Kate as she crossed the street, it knocked the poor woman off her feet. Even worse, after running over Kate once, the driver placed the car in reverse and ran over her again. Kate was left for dead as the automobile accelerated and sped out into the night in the same direction it had come from. Kate had terrible wounds. Her spleen ruptured, her spinal cord was damaged, and every single one of her ribs had been fractured. Amazingly, she was still alive despite the fact that it was uncertain whether she would survive for a while. However, Kate did gradually start to defy the odds and make a gradual recovery, much to the relief and astonishment of many. Her memory improved along with the strength of her body. She was able to provide information to detectives, identifying the vehicle as a white people mover with darkened windows. What was even more amazing was that she recalled what might have been a small but important fact. The driver's side wing mirror of the car was broken. Sadly, despite police efforts to investigate the incident, they were able to miss the white vehicle that was in fact visible on CCTV tape. But the message was never passed forward as a result of what they called an administrative error. Belfield was unhindered during this time and allowed to continue working as a nightclub doorman, absolutely unnoticed by the cops. Belfield's actions were now considerably more frequent and irregular. One evening, he admitted to someone he knew at the club where he worked that he would take young ladies upstairs after the bar closed. Once inside the room, the females would experience verbal and sexual assault. On occasion, Belfield would lead them to his outside parked car. Such a vehicle? A white, people-moving vehicle with darkened windows. The murder at the bus stop was not yet over. Only 3 months had passed since Kate Sheedy had attempted to be killed when Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton got the call he had been dreading. Just a few steps away from the location of Kate's attack, on Twickenham Green, another body had been discovered. The body was identified as 22-year-old Millie Dallar, a French-speaking student who had traveled to the UK for a 2-year study abroad program. About halfway across a field used for cricket, her body was discovered. The murder of Marcia MacDonald, at least one of the killings that had occurred in the neighborhood, was now definitively linked by the police. The same attack happened to Amelie. She had likely been knocked out after receiving a severe hit to the back of her head. Amelie had gone out late with her companions and taken a bus home, just like a few of the other young ladies before her. She did, however, asked the driver how long it would be before the bus headed in the opposite direction, which led investigators to assume that she may have dozed off on the bus and missed her stop. Amelie chose to walk, with tragic results, despite the fact that the driver had informed her it would only take around 10 minutes. Amelie turned around and headed toward Twickenham Green. She had the option of walking around, but she chose to go across the field instead because it was quicker. The murderer seized the chance as she crossed the green. DCI Sutton made himself fairly unpopular with his colleagues by reopening prior cases that hadn't been solved in his attempt to find out who killed Amelie. Kate Sheedy, Marcia MacDonald, and Millie Dallar were among them. DCI Sutton believed it was necessary to investigate the likelihood that they were all connected because they had all occurred in a very small region. Belfield found himself a new job that he really enjoyed while the DCI worked tirelessly to secure justice for the young girls and their families. He had entered the private automobile clamping business, but it shouldn't come as a surprise to hear that his operation wasn't entirely legal. He wasn't only doing it for the money, he also took pleasure in ticketing those who had parked legitimately. He would use intimidation to get money from them after they confronted him. He probably would have preferred it if they hadn't paid because there would have been the potential for some violence given his love of fighting. Believe it or not, he didn't merely walk the streets looking for cars to clamp. He actually attracted people to himself. He would discreetly post ads for a brothel he pretended to own across the area. He would provide the address to anyone who responded to the advertisement. He would approach and clip their wheels as soon as they exited their automobiles to enter the fictitious brothel. These individuals had no other option but to pay Belfield because prostitution is illegal in the UK, and they were unable to report it to the authorities. DCI Sutton, however, was moving forward steadily, but slowly without his knowledge. He realized that Amelie's phone had not been turned off like the others after reviewing the mobile phone records. Perhaps her killer had forgotten or become overconfident. 20 minutes after her body was discovered, her phone was still on. Twickenham Green no longer had the phone. Bolton-on-Thames did. This journey could not possibly be completed in 20 minutes. Given that it was late at night and the killer had a vehicle, the police were confident they could easily see the vehicle in each of the suspects' locations. The cops immediately started going through all of the CCTV footage minus 2,000 hours worth, looking for similar vehicles along all of the potential routes. After finishing the tedious work, the cops finally spotted one vehicle that showed up in both places. The police were certain that the object was a tiny Ford van. Similar to the Vauxhall Corsa, the issue is that it is an extremely popular automobile. In the UK, Ford vans are the most prevalent, and there were between 24,000 and 25,000 of them just in the Greater London area. Now the police have made the unusual decision to issue a public plea for the car at this stage of the inquiry. However, removing 25,000 vans would take too much time. DCI Sutton's plan would produce a good lead that would help them find this car and its driver as soon as feasible. Soon after the appeal, a woman claimed to know who the murderer was and went to the neighborhood police station. Joanna Collins was her full name. Levi Belfield's former girlfriend Joanna was well aware of his potential. The police were quite serious about her and her statement. First of all, she knew him personally. Second, there were no other suspects, making it a lead worth pursuing. DCI Sutton looked up Belfield's criminal history, but nothing particularly significant turned up. But something did catch his attention. Belfield had been taken into custody in a white Toyota Previa in May 2004. The vehicle in question matched Kate Sheedy's descriptions. The people mover was it. DCI Sutton now thought he had enough evidence to bring Belfield in for questioning after learning that he also owned a silver Vauxhall Corsa. On November 20th, 2004, quite early in the morning, DCI Sutton and his colleagues went to Belfield's house to bring him in. When the police entered the house, he was nowhere to be seen. They looked everywhere, and just when it appeared that they would have to go somewhere else, a surgeon on the team made the desperate decision to open up the attic or loft. Belfield was discovered trying to conceal himself in the corner while naked, climbing the ladder and flashing his flashlight. The surgeon seized him and screamed, "You're nicked," which is a well-known phrase in British law enforcement. The news of Belfield's arrest traveled quickly. Those who had previously been afraid of him viewed this as their chance to alert the police to what he had been up to. The barrier of fear and silence was coming down. DCI Sutton once had 27 separate investigations into Belfield open at the same time. These included multiple allegations of rape as well as murder and violence. However, the issue persisted. Finding evidence was proving difficult. If the authorities were to link Belfield to any of the assaults and killings that had occurred, they would need a working theory. The first person to come forward was Joanna, an ex-girlfriend who later turned out to be a crucial witness for the police. She offered a detailed narrative of her time spent with Levi Belfield, which was self-contained. She explained that he never attacked her in the face, only hitting her on the legs or other parts of the body where injuries could be hidden. She would be struck again, even harder, if she ventured to yell, cry, or flinch in discomfort. She claimed that he made really improper remarks about schoolgirls who were walking down the street whenever they were in a car, and she gave an account of his language toward ladies. He truly disliked women and had nothing but contempt for them. They weren't as good as him, in his opinion. Despite having little regard for any women, it soon became clear that he had a particular dislike for middle-class women and felt the need to prove his superiority to them. The only way he could possibly demonstrate, in his opinion, that he was inferior to them was to humiliate or perhaps kill them. On March 2, 2006, Levi Belfield was formally charged. Despite the gravity of the situation, DCI Sutton stated that it gave him tremendous joy to finally cross Belfield's desk and rid the charges. Belfield, who was somewhat soulless, uncaring, and without remorse, did not respond. Throughout the entire exchange, he uttered just 2 words: not guilty. Levi Belfield was ultimately tried at London's Old Bailey in 2007. He was accused of killing Marcia MacDonald, Millie Dallar, and Kate Sheedy. He was observed to be uninterested during the entire process, spending much time staring up at the ceiling or picking at his fingernails. He persisted in denying all of the accusations made against him and made an effort to come across to the jury as courteous, well-spoken, and unwilling to hurt a fly. Fortunately, neither the judge nor the jury thought much of this. Belfield's defense was completely ineffective. Although he may have denied it verbally, his body language said otherwise. Why am I here? There is nothing wrong with me. My time is being wasted on this. Levi Belfield was found guilty on all charges on February 25, 2008, and in an unusual decision for the UK, he was sentenced to life in prison, meaning he will never be freed. He made no attempt to justify his conduct or make amends, and he showed no sign of regret. He simply accepted the judgment. Although this was undoubtedly fantastic news, the verdict also provided the family with closure and some justice for those unfortunate young women. The friends and relatives of Millie Dallar, whose death was still under investigation, could not say the same. But DCI Sutton wasn't finished with Belfield yet. There had been so many accusations against him that it was likely that at least some, if not all, of them were true. Belfield had previously resided in Walton-on-Thames in the apartment he shared with his girlfriend, Emma, according to Mr. Sutton, who discovered this at the conclusion of the investigation. Collingwood Place, the address where Belfield had resided, was approximately 20 yards from the location of Millie Dallar's last known whereabouts. 6 years had passed since Millie's homicide. DCI Sutton thought they finally had a reliable suspect. The police made a public announcement in February 2008 that Levi Belfield was now the main suspect in the Millie Dallar investigation. The police went over the 2002 CCTV footage once more. Let's not forget that Levi Belfield couldn't sleep and had left his girlfriend in the house early in the morning. Only 20 minutes separated that home from the last place Millie had been seen. CCTV evidence revealed that a red Daewoo Lexia, the identical automobile that Belfield's girlfriend possessed and that vanished and was never seen again, was seen leaving Collingwood Place just 10 minutes after Millie had been captured on camera. Levi Belfield was eventually tried for the slaying of Millie Dallar in May 2011. Ex-girlfriend Joanna Collins and Emma, Belfield's most recent partner, both showed up as witnesses. Emma was one of many witnesses who testified behind a screen, but Joanna insisted on approaching the man who had been torturing her for so long. Belfield was plainly upset by this as he sat in the audience, furiously scanning the court while repeatedly rocking back and forth. At this time, he understood that no one was afraid of him any longer and that he had no control over the women he had abused for so long. 7 weeks passed during the study. Levi Belfield was given a second life sentence after being found guilty of killing Millie Dallar. Belfield smugly yawned in court as the guilty verdict was announced. Belfield has made numerous confessions to killings in the UK from his prison cell as part of his ongoing effort to maintain his notoriety since being imprisoned. His disclosures have gotten to the point where few, if any, people any longer take him seriously. Belfield received the equivalent of the death penalty, despite the absence of the death penalty in the UK. He was initially sent to Wakefield Prison in Yorkshire, was transferred to HMP Franklin in the northeast of England after protesting about the prison's conditions, and possibly as an act of retaliation by the state. Criminals including Harold Shipman, Charles Bronson, and Peter Sutcliffe have resided there, along with Belmarsh, arguably the most notorious jail in the UK. The jail maintains a very rigid schedule, and convicts are confined to their cells for 23 hours every day. Even the most seasoned criminals who speak of Franklin are afraid to go back there. Belfield discovered the truth for himself in 2016 after a fellow prisoner sliced his face with a handmade knife. Even your typical thug or bank robber will not tolerate killing children. Belfield has stated that prison guards have beaten him up since the attack and have given other inmates access to him so they can hurt him. Naturally, we couldn't possibly approve of such conduct, but we'll let you decide what's proper or inappropriate. Without Levi Belfield, the streets are unquestionably safer now. He will thankfully never again be allowed to harm anyone and will have to spend the rest of his life constantly watching his back.